One thing that never ceases to amaze me is how many Indigenous peoples have maintained their culture, here specifically in North America, have maintained their culture despite the violent infliction determined by the colonizers. And on that note, we're going to have a conversation right now about culture. So I often talk about the conversations I have with my little humans because school brings a lot of things to their attention and often also brings things to their attention that they don't want to see out of people. And today's topic of discussion in school was, what is Canada's culture? So I asked him, what is Canada's culture? He names to me a bunch of holidays. Sports. And it becomes acutely clear to me that even in school, when they try to discuss the topic of culture, they still can't flat out come out and say that there is none. Colonizers don't have a culture. And this matters because the truth is, there's constantly this resistance right now with the anti-immigrant movement that's saying how much y'all want to preserve your culture, but y'all don't even know what the foundation of a culture is. All I see are holidays that y'all don't understand and manufacture and use to spread propaganda about false histories and false narratives, pretending some sort of savior or heroic event happened when really it was just colonization and violence. You perform religiousness or religiosity or whatever you want to call it. It is a complete performance. And yes, that is an aspect of culture. Where I am in Atlantic Canada, alcoholism and gambling seem to be a very common part of the culture. But we're not honest about any of that. That bigotry and misogyny are common practice of the culture. And I'm not going to tell you that this was an easy discussion, because then my son went on to say that, they then started to list what their culture is, and my son didn't know what to tell them. Because you see, if I take, for example, the context of being a first-generation born immigrant, I could use a few different examples of multi-generational immigrants, specifically, for example, Indians. For those of you unaware, there were 5th, 6th, and 7th generation Indians in Western Canada. They're vastly different from Indians in the motherland, who are vastly different from first-generation Indians born in Canada, who are vastly different from Trinidadian Indians or West Indians. And so when you look at that narrative, and you look at, for example, specifically, I'm Northeast African, let's go with Egyptian, okay? Because even within that, there's a bajillion cultures. But let's say I was to say my identity is as that of culturally Canadian Egyptians, I would be lying. Because I'm not raised among them. Due to the violent nature of my upbringing, I was not even raised by my parents really much. I got exposed to my culture. I got exposed to my motherland. I lived there for approximately half my life up until the age of 22. But I would not have considered my culture to be of a motherland Egyptian. I sure as hell am not culturally Canadian. But even when I compare myself to my older sister and my mother, I don't even share their culture. The fact is, me and my 2 children have created a culture almost exclusively our own. Because being diasporically inheriting of certain aspects of identity doesn't mean you will preserve them all, and doesn't mean you will continue to evolve in any direction like anyone else. If you're continuously isolated and have to figure it out, you can't. You can't have a culture that's common. And I feel like that actually is more synonymous as to what Canadian culture is. I don't mean the unmelanated Canadian culture. I mean the culture of the multi-generations of many isolated immigrants that have had to intermix with other immigrants and figure it out. Their children being quite literally caught between three worlds: their relatives in the motherland, the land that they live on, and the world their parents come from, which no longer exists once they leave. And then they have to figure out their own. So aside from the fact that I do find it offensive and highly inaccurate that we are teaching children what a quote-unquote Canadian culture is, while simultaneously completely lying about what culture is, not even looking at its definition, not even admitting the fact that it's a culture of theft and denial and selfishness and capitalism and individualism and coercive control, or just addiction to control. We can't even sit in the discomfort of the truth, so much so that we've even closed our blinders to our surroundings. I dedicate this and many other pieces where I speak about my children to my children. They are the reason I think outside the box. They're the first and true family I've ever had. And every day I seem to find a new raison d'etre that keeps me waking up in the morning. Anyway, some discomfort for all of us to sit in. Do you feel the discomfort yet?